This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Rising tensions. Oil prices rise, bond yields inch lower after Turkey shot down a Russian fighter plane, keeping investors on edge.
Border business. The companies and states trying to cash in on the growing trade between Mexico and the U.S.
Best fit for you? The right questions to ask when selecting a brokerage firm so you don't get hit with hidden costs. All of that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, November 24th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tensions are running high across the globe tonight. Early today, Turkish jets shot down a Russian warplane near the Syrian border. That put Moscow in direct conflict with a NATO member, sending tremors through multiple markets, most notably oil. Crude spiked nearly 3%, its biggest one-day gain in 3 weeks. The rise in oil sent the energy sector higher in the stock market, and that helped lift the broader stock market after some initial wobbles. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 19 points to finish at 17,812. The Nasdaq added a fraction of a point, and the S&P 500 tacked on 2.5. But the heightened concerns also drove money into safe haven assets like U.S. Treasuries, which saw prices climb and yields dip. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera has more on the incident and the consequences.
Turkey confirmed it shot down that Russian warplane this morning near the region of Latakia, claiming it violated Turkish airspace and ignored repeated warnings, 10 of them within the space of 5 minutes. Russia denies that the plane crossed the Syrian border into Turkish skies. Video footage of the incident showed a warplane on fire before crashing on a hill, 2 crew members apparently parachuting out. A press release from a Syrian rebel group said one of the pilots was killed, the other captured. Russia later confirmed that. This isn't the first issue when it comes to Russia and Turkish airspace. Last month, Turkish jets shot down a Russian drone that it said had violated Turkey's airspace. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the shooting down of the plane was a stab in the back and warned of significant consequences in relations between the two countries. The situation spooked the markets because it raised concerns that the fierce battle in Syria and northern Iraq would widen to a much wider conflict between Russia and a member of NATO. But in an emergency meeting, NATO commanders urged member Turkey to show restraint to avoid escalating the conflict. And both Presidents Hollande and Obama in a news conference today said repeatedly they wanted to ensure this did not escalate into something bigger. President Obama also emphasized he thought this happened because Russia isn't fighting the Islamic State in Syria, but instead using their airstrikes to support Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
This points to an ongoing problem with the Russian operations in the sense that they are operating very close to a Turkish border, and they are going after moderate opposition that are supported by not only Turkey, but a wide range of countries. And if Russia is directing its energies towards Daesh and ISIL, some of those conflicts or potentials for mistakes or escalation are less likely to occur.
President Hollande also said that when he meets with Vladimir Putin on Thursday in Moscow, he will encourage him to change his strategy in Syria and instead dedicate his airstrikes solely to battling the Islamic State. For Nightly Business Report, Michelle Caruso-Cabrera.
Travel stocks fell today after the State Department issued a worldwide travel alert last night. The reason? Increased terror threats. That pressured shares of companies like Priceline, Expedia, and TripAdvisor. Airline stocks also fell, with Delta declining the most. And shares of hotels and cruise lines also lower. Hampton Pearson with details now on the warning which came just days before the holiday weekend.
The terror warnings from Homeland Security and the State Department are going out during the busiest travel week of the year, with millions of Americans traveling by trains, planes, and automobiles during the holiday period. The FBI and Homeland Security officials warning more than 18,000 local law enforcement agencies to be prepared for extremists who could seek to replicate the effects of the Paris attacks using similar weapons and tactics, although on a smaller scale. Most major cities have seen beefed up security since the November 13th Paris attacks. Now the focus, security experts say, will be on so-called soft targets, likely to attract large crowds, and so-called active shooter scenarios.
Law enforcement has to be vigilant. They have to be able to quickly respond to an active shooter scenario and respond in a way that could be most effective to them. And that's what they're asking local law enforcement to do.
Homeland Security says there is no evidence of an attack here in the U.S., but officials offer no such assurances for what might happen overseas now that ISIS has shown it can attack in the heart of Europe. So the State Department is telling Americans traveling worldwide for the next 90 days to be extra vigilant.
If you're going to be traveling, just maybe take an extra step and try to decide what's going on in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Know where you're going, just plan a little bit better. I think it's very important to not let the bad guys win.
Right.
Not let somebody across the world tell us, be afraid.
That State Department alert is the first in nearly a year. After a month of deadly terrorist attacks on 3 continents that have killed hundreds of people, government officials are aware there is indeed anxiety across the country. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Hampton Pearson in Washington.
Let's turn now to our guests for more context on the rising tensions around the globe and how it will impact your travel and why the stock market's reaction remains relatively muted. David Malpass is president of Encima Global, and Sean Henry is president of CrowdStrike Services, a security firm. Welcome to both of you. Sean, let me start with you. This weekend, would you let your mother or your son travel to Europe?
I actually do have family members that are traveling to Europe, and they asked my advice. I agree with other people that I've seen talk about this pretty adamantly, about not being fearful, that credible threats are being addressed, that there is extra security. There's a lot of effort that's going into identifying, using intelligence to look for these types of attacks. And I think that it's really critical that we not slow our lives down completely. We've got to be aware and we've got to be alert. Certainly, we don't want to be naive and reticent, however, and it's really critical that we continue to move forward in a productive way, but also in a way that allows us to be safe. We need to be vigilant.
And yet, David, we also now have very much increased tensions between Russia and Turkey, putting kind of a different slant on the situation and the fight against terrorism.
That's right. We've got, oddly, and it's a new problem, Russia right in the middle of both the NATO-Assad battle that's going on. The NATO wants Assad to be gone. And then separately in the Shiite versus Sunni conflict. So Russia is backing Iran and Assad in Syria. And that's putting a lot of tension on the Gulf states because oil prices are down. So I think this is truly a dangerous situation. Add to that the refugees, which Europe really hasn't resolved. So I think this is going to go on for a while, and it does create a lot of pressure and tension. It comes on the top of, on the economic side, what's basically a profits recession and a commodity recession. We got new profits data out today, down 25% year over year for undistributed corporate profits. That's the money that corporations have to invest, down 25%.
It sounds, David, like you think the equity markets most particularly are being naive or not paying enough attention to all of these threats, whether they are terroristic in nature or economic in nature. If you feel that way, why do you think that is?
Well, I think we've gotten complacent. We've been in a 7-year bull market, and I'm not a perma bear. I'm not exactly bearish, but I think we've got 3 things coming together right now that are problematic, and equity markets should be paying more attention. Profits, commodities, and the huge tension right there in Syria that we saw this morning.
Sean, let me turn back to you if I could, because this worldwide travel alert, that doesn't get issued very often by the U.S. government. It's a relatively rare occurrence on a worldwide basis anyway. So that, I think, has people quite nervous about what's going to happen over this long holiday weekend. And you have Black Friday and you have Thanksgiving parades and things along those lines. How do you feel about the security forces here in the United States and their ability to enforce and protect at those big events?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable with security here in the United States. I spent 24 years in the FBI, so I've worked very, very closely with the intelligence services. I've worked globally with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, and certainly domestically here with state and local law enforcement and the FBI, the Joint Terrorism Task Forces. These organizations, while this is big in the news right now, rightfully so, what happened in Paris was a tragedy, and it's something we need to be very concerned about. Law enforcement has been dealing with these threats for years, and they continue to deal with these on a regular basis. Even things that the general public doesn't hear about, law enforcement, the FBI are working on 24/7, 365 days a year.
But
so
Sean, I don't mean to interrupt, but is it different this time, though? Because you seem to have ISIS, you seem to have Al-Qaeda, and you seem to have Boko Haram all competing for the headlines here.
It is, Sue, and it's different because we've seen the tactics and techniques of the adversaries change. We haven't seen these types of attacks like we saw in Paris, multiple attacks, simultaneous shooters, very well coordinated, tactical, long guns, suicide belts against soft targets. It's changed. But what the law enforcement community is doing, the FBI and the intelligence agencies, they are currently working collaboratively with Western partners. They're collecting intelligence. They are working to disrupt ongoing planning. They're working to disrupt people who they know might be associated with the jihadi cause, not necessarily tied directly to ISIS, but people who might be inspired, copycats.
David, I want to get a quick answer from you, if I might. What should I do with my money in the face of the triple threat of risks that you see?
Hi, Tyler. Well, we've been in this, there's nothing else but equities phase. I think right now caution, meaning lightening up some on equities, being a little heavier on bonds, waiting to see how this shakes out in terms of the global slowdown that's underway.
All right.
I'm worried about the refugee. I don't think the previous speaker was taking full enough account of the hundreds of thousands of refugees that are on the move right now this winter.
An extremely difficult problem to solve there. David Malpass with Encima Global and Sean Henry, we appreciate your time tonight, gentlemen. Thank you.
Still ahead on the program, one of the biggest growth opportunities for the transportation sector may not be where you think. That story coming up. The economy grew more rapidly over the summer than previously thought. Gross domestic product, the broadest measure of goods and services produced, expanded at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 2.1% in the third quarter, better than the first estimate of 1.5%. Business investment was stronger and stockpiles rose, but a key measure of corporate profits within that report fell during that period.
Well, despite that increase in growth, Americans have lost confidence in the economy, and it's because of the job market. According to the Conference Board's latest survey, fewer people expect more jobs to be created in the coming months. They also don't expect their incomes to rise. The decline in confidence comes as a bit of a surprise since employers did add more than 270,000 jobs in October.
Home prices rose more than expected in September. The S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index reports a nearly 5% increase over last year. In San Francisco, home prices rose at the fastest pace, up 11%, followed by Denver and Portland, Oregon. Last night, we told you that existing home sales in October fell as rising prices, increasing mortgage rates, and a lack of supply kept some buyers out of the market.
Trade, of course, is a critical part of the U.S. economy, and trade between the U.S. and Mexico is growing with about $1.5 billion worth of goods moving across the border every single day. And that's creating some huge opportunities for companies that haul all those goods. Morgan Brennan reports from Santa Teresa, New Mexico.
This is Union Pacific's $400 million Santa Teresa facility, a huge rail hub right near the border, as the company looks to capitalize on increased trade with Mexico.
The intermodal yard that we're in replaced. It basically doubled the size of the yard. 200,000 lifts annually we can do in this facility, and it can grow to 700,000.
That's quite a number.
Yes, hoping the business grows like that.
Trade between the U.S. and Mexico totals $530 billion a year, up 550% over the past 2 decades since NAFTA was signed. And with costs rising in Asia, Mexico has become a manufacturing destination of choice for makers of autos, aerospace, appliances, even computers.
That operation is primarily dedicated for the BTO model, build-to-order model for computers, for Dell and HP. It is the largest of its kind in the world of any company.
That means more freight moving across the border. And transportation companies like Union Pacific are cashing in.
From a Union Pacific standpoint, it represents 10% of the company's total revenue. So it's big, it's growing, good growth opportunities south of the border.
It's a twofold opportunity for transports as raw materials and products come into Mexico from the U.S. and Asia, are assembled and then shipped back north, even this locomotive. And it will only get bigger as consumers spend more and new initiatives, including the U.S. exportation of oil to Mexico, come online. A number of companies see dollar signs. Kansas City Southern and Berkshire Hathaway's BNSF Railway have been expanding their operations tied to the border. And Ryder System, XPO Logistics, and Werner Enterprises all say cross-border business continues to be one of their fastest-growing segments.
It's a big part of our business. I mean, Mexico is 20% of our revenues as it relates to our one-way trucking operations. It's 14% of total revenues. It's something we see getting bigger and bigger over time. We're bullish on it.
And it isn't just companies doubling down. States have become more aggressive about capturing trade through their border crossings as well. Until now, New Mexico has largely lagged its neighbors, with the most and biggest crossings in Texas, followed by California and Arizona. But the state has taken dramatic steps to change that, and Santa Teresa is now the 9th busiest freight border crossing in the country.
Governor Martinez's vision, and certainly the vision of our department, is to make New Mexico the gateway of trade for the Americas.
And this is just part one, as a fast-track customs program for freight is in the process of rolling out. And the state and its Mexican counterpart, Chihuahua, are working to develop a binational city that would share resources and potentially dissolve the border altogether. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in Santa Teresa, New Mexico.
Hewlett-Packard's last report as one public firm disappoints, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The company, which recently split into two, missed the street's earnings and revenue estimates. Lower PC sales and a slump in demand from businesses weighed on the firm's quarterlies. After the close, shares of HP initially slipped. The shares of HP Enterprises were initially higher. Tiffany saw its sales slip in its third quarter, which it blamed on the strong dollar and lower tourist spending. The jewelry retailer also gave a full-year profit forecast that was below the street's consensus. Despite that, though, shares were up more than 3.5% to $79.36. And Hormel reported mixed quarterlies. The food maker gave a bright outlook for the next year as profits rose, helped by Spam, of course, and muscle milk brands, among others. The chief operating officer says acquisitions have helped the company's results.
We have to continue to grow the brands that we have, and we'll certainly continue to be on the lookout for companies and brands that meet our strategic fit for us. Those are the things that are really going to allow us to have record quarters.
Shares were almost 3% higher to $71.28. Dollar Tree's third quarter profit missed estimates as the company was hurt by expenses related to its acquisition of Family Dollar. Still, the company's top-line results beat estimates and same-store sales increased. Shares rose more than 6.5% to $74.16.
Campbell Soup reported earnings that topped estimates, and it hiked its full-year profit forecast. Cost-cutting measures have helped the food company deliver some chunky results. Shares rose 3% to $51.33. Cracker Barrel, my wife's favorite restaurant, also benefited from a decrease in expenses. Love those rocking chairs. Earnings were better than expected, but sales were disappointing, which the company blamed on a challenged consumer. The appetite for sausage biscuits just not as bottomless as we thought. Shares down more than 6% to $129.93. And the Centers for Disease Control says nearly 20 people have been infected with E. coli after eating chicken salad from Costco. 5 people have been hospitalized. 2 have developed a type of kidney failure, but there have been no deaths reported yet. Most of the infections reported from the western United States. Costco off slightly today, 162.19 the close.
More than 4 in 10 U.S. investors cite low fees and commissions as the primary reason for selecting a brokerage firm. That's according to a new Fidelity survey. But is that the right way to vet a brokerage firm? Sharon Epperson is back with us for more on that. So what should Sharon, what should investors really be looking out for?
Well, of course, everyone looks at that account minimum. Can I meet that? Are the commissions the lowest out there? But really, they need to be also looking at the fees that are charged for trading stocks and bonds. And there may be some fees, particularly if you don't think about bond pricing necessarily, necessarily when you're looking at some of these brokerage firms. A lot of people are looking at how they can do the best stock trades, and there may be a markup with some brokers. So you want to see if there is a markup fee, and it could be as much as $13 per bond. So this is what the Fidelity survey found. So you want to make sure that you know if they have one and how much that might be.
I would assume you'd want to look at the kind of investor you are. How much do I trade? What do I trade? And what are the charges on the kinds of transactions that I do?
That's absolutely right. And that's particularly important also when you're looking at stock trades as well and looking at price improvement, which is basically when you press that place an order button, you want to make sure that the price that you're getting is actually an improvement perhaps than what you're seeing there. And many of these brokers will tell you how much they can give you in terms of a price improvement. That can also save you money down the road.
So you mentioned some of the components, but there's also, you know, how much hand-holding do you need?
Exactly.
I would assume education, seminars, things that you can attend.
When you're trying to evaluate a broker, one of the things that you really want to look for, something Tyler mentioned at the beginning, is how do you want to use that broker and what type of investment professional and firm is that? And look at FINRA for some research and some guidance there, finra.org, to do the broker check and check them out. But you also want to find out not only about commission and fees, not only about price improvement, but what kind of education and research do they offer on all kind of asset class. This is your money. You want to be able to make some informed decisions yourself. And then how can you reach out to these folks? Can you call them? Can you email them? Can you go in person to get your questions answered? Because the way you like to interact with your broker is also very important in helping you to make the right decisions.
Absolutely.
Give me a human being every time. I want to talk to a human. I don't want.
I have a lot of questions.
I don't want an FAQ.
And you know, it's interesting because we do this. We should know, and we want to talk to a human being. So it's up to you guys, but that's what we say, right?
Sharon, thanks.
Thanks, Sharon.
Alrighty, coming up, the power shift taking place in retail and the companies that are trying to capitalize on it.
Here's what to watch for tomorrow. Loads of data, including reports on durable goods orders. Personal income and spending is out, and a read on housing with new home sales. And that is what to watch for on Wednesday.
An investigation into Walmart's operation in Brazil finds possible misconduct, including potential foreign bribery. The Wall Street Journal reports that federal authorities are looking into $500,000 in payments to an individual hired to obtain government permits. Investigators also want to know whether senior Walmart employees approved those payments. Shares were little changed in initial after-hours trading on that report.
German prosecutors have launched an investigation into suspected tax evasion at Volkswagen. It's related to the automaker's emissions cheating scandal, and it centers on the fact that the 800,000 cars understated carbon dioxide emissions, leading to lower vehicle tax rates. The prosecutor's office says it is investigating 5 employees.
Everybody loves a bargain, and that's why many traditional department stores are opening up off-price chains where designer goods are sold at a discount. And with the overall retail sector struggling, it is one area that many companies hope to find growth. Courtney Reagan has our story tonight.
It's no secret that some retailers are struggling. But there is one area where sales continue to grow, at off-price stores like TJ Maxx and Ross stores, and at outlets. At these type of retailers, promotions are already built into prices, and the merchandise is either overstock from a traditional store or it's made by the same designers but specifically for the off-price or outlet store. And shoppers love the thrill of those deals.
Department store may be overpriced. Smaller stores, definitely better deal.
You like to get the best deal for the best item.
Things go out of style so quickly, and then you spend a lot of money perhaps on something, and then you don't wear it next year, or you don't like the way it looks.
Higher-end department stores are building out their own off-price offerings as fast as possible to capture share. Saks has doubled the off-Fifth footprint it had several years ago, with plans to open 2 Manhattan locations by 2017. Bloomingdale's just opened its first urban outlet in Manhattan, its 14th outlet store. Nordstrom plans to nearly double its rack store locations by the year 2020, a much faster growth rate than its plans for expanding the traditional store footprint. Lord & Taylor is getting in the off-price game too. This is Find at Lord & Taylor. It's the first of a total of 6 planned stores that will open by the end of 2016. And mid-tier department stores are getting in too. Kohl's is piloting its own off-price concept. While sales at Macy's traditional stores have been disappointing the last 2 quarters, the retailer is quickly expanding its new off-price backstage store expansion. The first 4 opened this fall, with 53 more scheduled to open over the next 2 years.
I think it will benefit Macy's in the long run because just as they look at their data and as we look across the landscape of retail, it's a really important sector. Off-price remains very attractive to consumers, so we expect this to be a growing sector.
While the off-price and outlet space is a big growth sector now, some question if there's enough demand to go around for the new players looking to capitalize, and whether or not it will cannibalize sales at the retailer's traditional stores. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan in Paramus, New Jersey.
Blue Origin, the private space company that is backed by Amazon's CEO Jeff Bezos, made space history. The company says it successfully landed a reusable rocket back onto Earth after an unmanned flight to the edge of space. The firm's new Shepard space vehicle flew a suborbital test mission to more than 300,000 feet, reaching nearly 4 times the speed of sound. Bezos says commercial suborbital flights carrying paying passengers could be less than 2 years away. Not me.
Not me.
Not me.
No, sir.
We'll be reporting on that.
Yes.
That does it for us. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for me as well. I'm Tyler Mathis, and have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow on Thanksgiving Eve.
Yes.